Hello, Lightnings. How are you doing today? This is Carolyn at Luminosity, and I'm here to share a little bit about happiness. So, I heard about this podcast called How to Build a Happy Life. And Dr. Arthur Brooks is on this podcast. He is a professor at Harvard. And he has an episode called How to Identify What You Enjoy. So this is episode 8 in season 1 for anyone who's interested. And it came out on November 23rd, 2021. And on it, he has a conversation with Lori Gottlieb, who is a psychotherapist and is wonderful and has written some amazing things. And they have this fascinating discussion about what is happiness. And I thought that I would pass on a little bit of what I heard, because I realized that, sometimes we hear things from different people and it doesn't hit. And then sometimes we hear it from somebody different and it gets through, and who knows why. But I thought that a message about happiness would be a good one to spread to the world, because we're all wondering how to be happy, right? And so I like spreading messages that might bring happiness or love to you. So what Dr. Brooks talks about is that people often think that happiness is a feeling. They say, I want to be happy, and they think it's a feeling, and it's not a feeling. It has a lot of feelings associated with it, which is what he says, which I thought was fascinating. Like, I always think of happiness as a feeling. I feel happy, right? But what he talks about is that there are 3 parts, 3 ingredients that make up happiness. And Lori Gottlieb adds a 4th. So the 3 ingredients of happiness that he talks about are enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose. So when you have enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose, that's what makes up a happy moment and a happy life. Which I want to just stop for a minute right there, because I think that's so mind-blowing to think about, that happiness isn't just a feeling. It has ingredients: enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose. And those 3 words are like different facets of this happiness diamond. And so he goes on to say, when people have enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose in abundance and in balance, that's when they feel happy. And oftentimes, both he and Lori Gottlieb talk about that when people come to therapy, they say that they don't feel happy, and it's because one of these things is out of balance or doesn't exist. Okay? And so then they feel like something's wrong. Like they know they have some of the ingredients, but they don't have all of them. So they might have a lot of things that are enjoyable in their life and things that bring them satisfaction, but there's no purpose. Or they might have this amazing purpose and they feel satisfied with the work they do or the job they do or whatever it is that they're doing, but they're not enjoying it. um, or any number of combinations of things, right? Might have one and not two, or two and not one. And so I can definitely relate to that. I can relate to how many times in my life I've had enjoyment and satisfaction, but not purpose. Or I've had purpose, but no enjoyment and not a lot of satisfaction. And I often during those times felt incredibly lost. Like, I know I'm supposed to be happy right now, but I don't feel it and I don't know why. And I would feel a sense of like guilt. Like, why am I not happy now? So Lori Gottlieb goes on to say that those three things are what make up happiness, but you can't complete the recipe without human connection. She goes on to say that there are some things that people do that make them happy that are done on their own, like taking a hike or reading, or some artists who work alone. But it's very hard to maintain for long periods of time. Happiness comes from, having connections with other people. And I agree. So Dr. Brooks goes on to say that he describes enjoyment. So I'm going to break down all three of these: enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose, and a little bit of connection based on this podcast. So please go listen to the podcast if you want to. I'm just sort of passing this on, hoping that this message gets to whoever it needs to get to. So let's talk about enjoyment. So enjoyment, he describes, is pleasure plus elevation. And what that means is when you're learning something and finding pleasure from it, that's when you have authentic enjoyment. So there's some kind of growth there, some kind of expansion. And I love that. I mean, I'm a big fan of learning and growing all the time. So the things that I do enjoy the most is when I am learning something. That's for me. It's different for everybody though. So what Lori Gottlieb goes on to say is that happiness is a byproduct of living our life in a meaningful way. And that's what we often aspire to. And that when we have happiness as a goal in and of itself, it's often a recipe for disaster. And I thought about that. And I thought about some of the people who are most unhappy that I know. And a lot of them are deeply in search of happiness. But they want happiness as the goal. They just want to be happy, right? And we think of that like, as almost like the American dream. Like, I just want to be happy, right? And what Lori Gottlieb is saying is that the happiness is a byproduct of living our life in a meaningful way, right? Which is the purpose part of the ingredients of enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose that make up happiness. And yes is all I have to say, is yes. And Lori Gottlieb then goes on to make this statement, ask this question that says, when it comes to happiness, we ask ourselves, how can I love and be loved? And loving ourselves is a part of that, she says. We can make ourselves unbelievably unhappy by being unloving to ourselves. So how can I love and be loved is what we ask ourselves. And that comes down to the connection part. And Dr. Brooks then adds that there have been studies done that people who are happiest in their 70s and 80s are the people who had the most connections in their lives, starting in their 20s and 30s. Which I find interesting because I think that the pandemic has really disconnected people from other people in a lot of ways. And so I wonder how this is going to affect happiness as time goes on. I know that a lot of the people that I see, that I talk to, are feeling extremely lonely and disconnected. So when Lori Gottlieb asks, how can I love and be loved? I've just been thinking about that question nonstop. How can I love and be loved? And I'm less focused on the being loved. I mean, of course I want to be loved. And I'm sure everyone wants to be loved. But I don't think that I can be loved without being loving. And I have to be loving to myself first. I've learned the hard way that if I'm not loving to myself, it's very hard to love someone else. I can think that I'm doing it, but in the long run, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It comes out sideways in all sorts of ways. And so I have to really like myself, love myself, like look in the mirror in the morning and like what I see. I don't have to love what I see, but I do have to like it. And it makes things so much easier. So how can I love? So I think love is an action more than a feeling. And so a big part of the reason that I am doing these videos is because I want to spread some love and happiness and light and knowledge to the world. This is my way of being loving. And all I hope is that these videos get to one person who needs to hear these messages. That's all I can hope for. So that's all for today. You are loved. You're loved so much more than you know. So much more than you know. So I wish you that love, and I wish you light, and I'll talk to you soon.